All right, episode number 11 is here. Today on the Artist of Motion podcast, we feature the legendary Senior Grandmaster of the International Karate Connection Association, Chuck Sullivan. I jokingly mentioned a while back while discussing this podcast with Chuck that if you're in Kenpo and you don't know who Chuck Sullivan is, you're living under a rock, in a cave, buried in a glacier, flying around on an asteroid in outer space somewhere. Chuck's been studying Kenpo since February of 1959, which at the time this podcast is going to air is going to make 59 years of Kenpo. It's a long time, folks. Chuck is a wonderful human being who has influenced and taught thousands of people in his career. I want to take a moment to say a special thank you to Chuck's daughter Janine and her husband for letting me visit their place in Paso Robles and interview Chuck, as well as to Lainey for letting me steal a couple hours of Chuck's time. Big thank you to all of you. I'm going to go ahead and call this a part one. We ran over 90 minutes for this one, and we literally only covered the period between 1959 when Chuck started training through about 1965 or so, with just a handful of 70s/80s/present day references. So we are definitely going to have to do at least a part two here soon. All right, then, let's get to the conversation. All righty, we are here in beautiful Paso Robles, California. I have Chuck Sullivan and Lainey Klesko here with me. So, Chuck, anybody in Kenpo knows who you are, what you've been doing. For those of our listeners out there who are not part of the Kenpo community, can you give us some of your background for us?
Oh, background. All right. I started Kenpo in February of 1959. And at that time, Kenpo was not Kenpo. the word karate or karate wasn't even in the American vocabulary. Nobody knew what it was. I didn't know what it was. I'd never heard of it. And just so happened that I was my brother-in-law came home one night. He was living with us right after he got out of the Marine Corps. And I came home one evening and he said, "Did you know there's a judo school up on Tweedy Boulevard?" And I said, "No, but where on Tweedy? Because I want to check this out." I'd always had a desire to wear a gi. I'd seen them. I'd never seen one in person. I've only seen pictures of them, but they just looked cool to me, and I knew what that was all about. Of course, everybody did. Everybody knew what judo and jiu-jitsu a little bit. They heard the term, but they weren't really that familiar with what it really was. So I went up there like the next evening, and I cupped my hands at the window, looked in. And there was some mats on the floor, a little load divider, a chair, a desk, some pictures on the wall, and that was it. And not very impressive, but still kind of intriguing. And I'm about ready to leave, and there was a couple of guys leaning against a car parked right in front of the place. And one of them says to me, he says, "Are you interested in that?" And I said, "Oh, yeah. How much are the judo lessons?" Because in those days, everything had a price tag. And it depended on cost as to whether you were going to do it or not. So the first thing I asked was, "How much?" So he said, "Well, we don't teach judo here." And I said, "Oh." I looked up on the roof, and there's a great big sign that said JUDO. Okay. I said, "Well, what is this?" And there was another word on the window, and I said, "I did the best I could. I tried." "All right, what is this?" Aikido. He said, "No, that's Aikido." I said, "Oh, what is that?" He said, "Well, we don't teach that either." So now I'm looking around for Alan Funt and the camera, and that whole, it was like, all right, I just walked into a bad joke here. There was one more word on the window, and I did the best I could. Karate. Come on, karate. What is karate?
Logical to me.
That's right. So, that's karate, and it took me another couple of minutes to roll the R. My Irish tongue had never done that before, and I finally got karate. Okay, what is that? That's what we teach. What is it? Well, it's a striking art. It's this, it's that. Oh, see, I had envisioned myself throwing somebody about your size through a plate glass window with judo. I mean, that's
when the Bond movies came out, so,
That's impressive. I mean, just hitting somebody. I've been hitting people all my life. So that didn't impress me a whole lot, It's boxing and so, yeah, all right. But then we went into the studio, and he showed me some stuff with this other guy, and I should have realized at the time, and it actually took me years to realize, somebody that knows even a little bit more than you about something that you know nothing about can impress the hell out of you. They can just blow you away. And I thought I said to myself, whoa. I mean, I would not want to meet this kid when he was, on the wrong side of liking me. And I was not some wide-eyed 17 or 16-year-old kid. I mean, I'd been in the Marine Corps. I'd known some killers. I mean, downright honest to God, people that, killed people. and real rough people. I'd grown up in the streets of Chicago, so I knew what fighting was all about, and this kid really impressed me. And come to find out later on, he wasn't really very good at all, and he dropped out a few months after I started, so he never got very far. But he did his job that night, and so I said, "Well, can I come by and watch a class?" I said, "Sure, of course." And I came by, and the next class I saw was Mr. Ed Parker. And when Ed moved, Ed Parker was 27 years old at the time. I was 27 years old at the time.
Yeah, you guys are like 9 months apart, if I remember correctly.
Where I was born in November, getting ready. I was just turned 27, and he was born in March. He was getting ready to turn 28 in March, and this is in February. So, we're about 10 months apart. Yeah. And so it was funny because he had this fatherly demeanor. Everybody looked upon him as a mentor and so on. And I looked upon him as a guy that knew a heck of a lot more than I did about something, and I really wanted to learn that. But because we were practically the same age, we were contemporaries more than, this like a father figure.
Right, it wasn't the old wizened master at that point.
No, well, a couple of guys the same age, And looking back at it now, we were still kids. At 27 years old, come on, you're just getting around to getting formed. And it took me 45 years to reach the age of 21. I mean, I was sort of developmentally whatever it is, challenged. Anyway, so that was my introduction, and then the school there only lasted a few months. He had bought the school from an Aikido instructor who was a sergeant in the Air Force, and wherever he would go, he'd start a school. And then, if possible, he would leave the school in the care of his most senior student or students. Well, he didn't have time enough to develop these students yet. So when he was getting ready to get transferred, which I guess was a little earlier than he expected or anticipated, he started looking for somebody to buy it, and he found Ed Parker and took a look at it, I guess, and said yes, and because that's what it was at the time. I understand from later on that he did a demonstration and retained all of the guy's students. So, again, Ed could impress. Oh, my God. I mean, when he moved, he transferred his power through the floor into the walls, and the building kind of reverberated.
And that's saying something, considering those were probably tatami mats at the time, too.
They were tatami mats, yeah.
That's really saying something.
No, they weren't tatami. They were tatami up in Pasadena. And then later we inherited those. Oh, that's a funny story.
Oh, you got to tell it then.
When we inherited those mats, I had a friend that had a little like a little pickup, like a Pinto pickup type, something like that. And we put these mats. They are heavy.
Yeah.
I mean, so we stacked them up, and on the bed of his truck, and they fit very nicely. We stacked them up, and we're going to drive from Pasadena to South Central LA, and we're driving down Walnut Avenue, going to the freeway, and all of a sudden my friend tells me, "Chuck, I don't think we can do this." I said, "Why not?" He says, "The front wheels aren't on the ground." the truck had tilted, and the wheels, he says, "I'm not steering." And I said, "Well, whoa." We put on the brakes, and we got back to the student. I said, "Somebody's got to come off." So I said, "But we still need to get in there." So we took them out of the back and put them on the cab of the truck.
Nice.
Yeah,
but as soon as counterbalance going on.
Yeah, but as soon as we got three of them, from convex to concave, the truck top went pop, and we looked up and the thing was coming towards us. And he said, "This ain't gonna work either, son." Right, you're right. And we took them off, and a guy by the name of Jerry Poteet. I don't know if you know who Jerry is, right?
Yep.
Was. He's passed on now. But great guy. And he was there in the dojo that night, and he says, "You guys need a hand as well if we need to get these mats on the Crenshaw Boulevard and between Slauson and he knew where it was." And he says, I'll take him. I'll help you. And he had a pickup truck, and we threw half of them on there, and we caravan down there. And I told him, I said, "It's a long ways down there." He said, "Not to worry. I got it covered."
Nice.
Very nice. Very nice. Yes. I've appreciated that ever since. And Jerry became quite the Jeet Kune Do practitioner under Bruce.
Yeah, he was Vic's instructor for
and G. Kendo. He's one of them. Yeah, he and
Bustillo, Richard Bustillo.
Richard Bustillo, right? Anyway, so that just every time I think about those mats and that we inherited, I think about that.
Nice.
And because what we had at the time was like these 18-inch square grass mats all sewn together, and then because they were rougher than a cob, you couldn't jump around those on your bare feet. So then we had bought painters' tarps, canvas, and we stretched those across the grass mats. And the grass mats were almost as hard as the floor.
Yeah.
And you couldn't really do much in the way of takedowns. Although in those days, we did takedowns on hardwood floors and concrete. We really, you kind of bounce a little bit and you hop back up, and no harm, no foul.
The things you do when you're young.
Oh boy. Yeah, the foolishness. The word makawari.
Oh yeah,
springs to mind.
Striking dummy.
Yeah, striking dummy. Yeah, a post in the ground with burlap had been wrapped around it nice and thick that had now worn down back to the original board. Yeah, you'd hit that thing and spring back on you. And I realized after about a couple of months, I was never going to be able to form calluses on my knuckles. Never. I mean, they just weren't going to do it. Some guys did, and some guys didn't. And mine just weren't going to do it. And, of course, they kept telling me, oh, your hand's going to be arthritic later on in life. I said, who cares? Well, now, now I care. Now I can't make a fist with my right hand any longer because the middle finger sticks out. Now I have diminished circulation in my legs, but that wasn't from karate. That was from smoking cigarettes. That's what I understand, yeah. Or maybe the guy just told me that to make me feel bad. I don't know. No. We told you not to do that. Anyway, where were we? We were just getting started. 27 years old, just getting started. And anyhow, like I said, the studio only lasted there for another few months. And then you can't run a business 4 days a week, 3 hours a day. It can't be done. Somebody's got to be there, et cetera, et cetera. Just whatever. If those guys hadn't been there, I don't know if I'd have gotten back there to check it out when they were there. I might have come back another time or so and they wouldn't have been there, and I'd have never been in the art. At least at that time, until maybe it became more popularized and be a whole different ball of game, ball of wax and different game altogether. But it's funny too because I was thinking just the other day, everybody is into everything now, and my whole expertise is strictly Kenpo, because first of all, I didn't have time for anything else, and I didn't want to just go and get a bit of this and a piece of that and a little bit of that and a little bit of the other and so on. Although we did mess around with jiu-jitsu when it first became popularized, and we all got hurt. We all got injured.
Not a easy sport to pick up and play every now and then. You kind of have to do that one regularly.
That's right, and you got to be young. You don't get into that when you're in your 60s.
I think Howard tried, but he was doing Krav Maga. Same problem though.
Same thing.
You can get into that later on.
Right. Right. So anyway, because I had and even that, I mean, as far as the art karate is concerned, I had the availability to study with anyone I wanted to throughout the years. I mean, I could have gone to anybody and would have been accepted into their school with open arms. I knew all these guys, and everybody knew everybody, and I never felt the need. I just never felt the need for any other style or system. I mean, I've seen them all. I know what they are. The beauty of it is that when you get to a certain level in the art, you don't need to be taught anymore, because you can analyze it yourself. Now, that's another whole story right there. How that comes about, or it came about for me. I don't know if other people have an epiphany, or if it's like water. It just rises up until finally they get it. And I don't even know if a lot of people realize they got it when they have it. I didn't really. And it took a specific thing for me. And that, of course, that's my Bruce Lee story. Because people ask us, they'll say, who was the most influential person in your experience in the art? Well, of course, it'd be Ed Parker, obviously. That would be nobody but Ed Parker. But along came Bruce. And the night I met Bruce Lee, I've told this story. In fact, matter of fact, I did a video on it because I think it's just it's a little tribute to him, and I just enjoyed so much what happened, and it's unique. Ed Parker was so renowned in the art at that time, and Bruce was literally nowhere here in the United States. And somebody told me, if you want to get into the film industry, you go talk to Ed Parker, because he's got the contacts and so on and so forth. And he liked Bruce, and he brought him down to the studio one night, and he was teaching the class, and Bruce was just out among the people watching. Nobody paid any attention to him, as we never did, anybody watching. Unless there was a good-looking young lady, you might, otherwise, who cared? So at the end of the class, we all got dressed, and we're walking across the mats with our shoes in our hands and our coats and whatever. And Ed walked out with Bruce, and he says, I want to introduce this guy to you. He says, he's a real hot, young Chinese martial artist. And then it's Bruce Lee, and he introduced us, and we all shook hands. And about that time, somebody called Ed to the phone or whatever, and so we're just getting ready to move, and then Bruce started up a conversation. I mean, he was really good at that. He could take over a conversation in a heartbeat. You'd be talking about something totally different, he'd walk in and change the whole subject, and he could just do that. And he's quite a character, really. And anyway, he was telling us about it, just coming back from Hong Kong. Well, boys, our ears pricked up immediately. Hong Kong, the mecca of Kung Fu. And so we asked him, he said, well, what's it like over there? And these are his words, because I remember them distinctly. He says, well, 95% of what they do is commercial bullshit. And I kind of, woo. I thought, that's a kind of a rough statement.
That's a bold one at that time, yeah.
I'm like, why? Really? And now I'm beginning to wonder if he knows what he's talking about. Because it's like, oh, come on. And then he says, of the other 5%, I won't try to imitate him. Anyhow, he had this slight speech impediment, and then a little bit of an accent. But he said, as of the other the other 5%, he said half of those are trying, but they don't know what they're doing. Now I'm thinking that leaves 2.5%. That's kind of low. That's ridiculously low. So I said, actually, we all kind of wow. And somebody or one of us said, well, what are those guys like? And he said, oh, those guys are the real deal. But they're not a school. They're more of a club.
Yeah.
More of a society. They're more of a tong.
Don't call us, we'll call you.
Yeah, right. He says, you guys couldn't even get down the alley where they work out. If you weren't Chinese, he says, you wouldn't even go there. So we kind of got an idea of what was going on. Then he dropped the bomb. And he said, by the way, I was watching what you were doing earlier, and you did this, and he showed us. And he looked like he had been in the class forever. I mean, he did what we were doing perfectly. And he said, why were you doing that? And I remember thinking, because Ed Parker was teaching us. What do you mean, why were we doing it? You know why we were doing that. We didn't just do it on our own. And somebody said something about why or what. He says, oh, I was just wondering because it was wrong. And that's when I remember, I think Dave Hebler got about 3 inches taller and looked at me like, you want him or should I take him? And I'm like, no, let's hear what he has to say first, before we go mopping up the mats with anybody. And we said, so what do you mean wrong? And he showed us what we were doing and why it was really not good at all. And I remember thinking at the time, the kid's right. And I say the kid, he's 9 years younger than I am. So when I was 31, he was like, he was 21 when I was 30. Yep. Yeah, so right, and this was right about the time I was 30, because I was just a brand new black belt, and I think Dave was still a brown belt at the time when we met. And anyway, so he laid that on us, and the thing that he picked out was not something that would destroy my faith in the system. Now I'd say, oh my God, what am I doing? What am I doing with this? But I realized a number of things at that, not at the moment, but I realized that, first of all, I realized he's right. And I can, you right now, and for probably the last several years, you could walk into anybody's dojo in the world and sit there and watch them long enough and say, that's bad. Because not everybody's teaching everything that's primo. I mean, sometimes you're teaching it for a reason. Sometimes there's no reason, and it's just plain bad, and it's tradition.
Yeah,
you would teach
sometimes even then the tradition gets passed down, and it's like the telephone game.
That's right.
They get, the first guy had it and it was great. The second guy had it, it was great. By the time the second guy passed it to the third guy, something got lost in translation.
Oh, that happens all the time too. Yeah. Sure, right. That'll happen within schools. I mean, but I'm talking like from the source, from Ed. But again, where did he learn it? He didn't. He learned it from someone also. And like I'm fond of saying all the time, this stuff didn't come off the mountain on tablets.
I just watched the Masters magazine interview you did. I was waiting for that quote. So.
Yeah, there was no burning bush. Somebody made this stuff up. Somebody created it, and that somebody in Kenpo was Ed Parker. He's the guy. So I remember driving home that night and saying to myself, "How come the kid could do that, and I can't?" And I was getting irritated with myself. I don't understand that. I mean, this kid picked that up so quickly. Well, yes, he did. I mean, it took him an hour of a class to sit there and watch it, and he picked one thing out. Big deal. But all of a sudden I said to myself, how do you know you can't do that? You've never tried. I never tried. Why didn't I try? Because I thought everything that Ed Parker was teaching us, I took as gospel. I took it 100% at face value. Well, I got to tell you, everything changed that night when I was driving home, and I said, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. And I didn't. And from then on, I started analyzing what I was being taught. And there were some things that I summarily just threw out myself. I just said, that's not any good, and I don't care who says it is. Because I can figure this out for myself. I'm a black belt now. I'm not as good a black belt as Ed Parker by any means, but I get it. Now I get it. And so, actually, that carried over onto my personal life as well. I just don't take everything anybody says as, just take it blindly. I'll take it under advisement, and I'll think about it. If it's important, I'll think about it a lot. If it isn't, who cares? I don't think about it a little bit, and I don't care. I don't care. It doesn't make any difference. It doesn't impact my life. I'll let it go. But as far as the art's concerned, Ed and I used to have some great discussions. I won't call them arguments, but I'll say he had one point of view, I had another, and there was times. I think one of my favorites is I forget the name of the technique that we call it clashing hammers.
Thundering hammers.
Thundering hammers. All right. And thundering hammers, you're coming out with two hammer fists using the underside of your hand. Well, your arm doesn't bend that way to get to the groin. That's why we turn it over in clashing hammers, and you can go completely up the back end if you want, because it guidelines and it fits, it molds, it does everything the other one doesn't do. So we're talking about that from West LA. We're driving from West LA to Pasadena, which isn't exactly around the corner.
Especially at that point in time with the road development that was there.
That's right. You weren't necessarily always. When I had to go from Southgate when the school closed, I had to drive 26 miles to Pasadena every night after getting off work and having dinner, because the class didn't start till 9 p.m., which was good for me. But on surface streets. Yeah,
no direct highway at that point.
The freeway would take you out of your way. I mean, there was freeway, but it would take you so far out of your way that you're better off on surface streets. So yeah. Anyhow, we were driving from West LA to Pasadena, and we're talking about this, and it's hard when you're sitting and somebody's driving and you're trying to show movement. So when we got to Pasadena, we got out of the car. I put him in a headlock. I said, "Do your thing," and he says, "Well." At one point, he says to me, he says, "No, what you don't understand, Chuck, is what you do with the leg first." And I said, "No, Ed, what you don't understand is you're the only one that can do that." I said, "You watch these guys run in a line. Nobody does that. You've taught it that way, but nobody does it. They get immediately into the move. They don't do that first, and as a result, Their arm doesn't bend that way, and it doesn't work. And so again, we grabbed him in a headlock. He put me in a headlock, so on and so forth. And I said, you can do it this way. I says, you can do it this way. I said, but the rest of us have a tough time. I said, Ed, why not just make it so much easier and so much surer, so much more positive? You're going to get there. And I remember his exact words. He says, you're right. I'm going to change it.
And he never did.
And he never did. I don't know if he forgot or if he just didn't want to say, by the way, I found a better way. Boy, when I find a better way, I'm the first one to jump on it.
Yeah, I've noticed that since I started with the IKCA. It didn't matter whose idea it came up with. If there's something better, you're going, wait a minute, we got to analyze this. Let's take a look at it. Let's see if we need to make it happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, you got to do that. Because otherwise, I mean, what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many traditional styles that are still stuck in that facet, but there's so many non-traditional styles in the same capacity. Somebody comes up with something better, and rather than propagate that and give it to other people as an option, it winds up becoming an offshoot. And this guy just teaches his own version of it, and nobody else does the same thing.
Right.
Versus, let's give it to our people as an option or as something we figured out that works better, and that way the whole lineage gets improved.
Right.
I never understood the logic behind that. It was such a really cool breath of fresh air when I found that with IKCA. So,
yeah.
Thank you for that.
We will. Oh, well, thank everybody who's analyzed it. I tell you, people have plumbed the depths of this system. I mean, we know it was good, but we didn't know it was this good. Really. I mean, people have plumbed the depths of it and come up with stuff. Some of the borrowing, blending, and combining, and things of that sort. Oh, wow. I mean, it's stuff that when we would see it, we'd go, how come we didn't think of that? This is great. Again, why didn't we think of it? Because we got pretty complacent and comfortable in what we had. These other people are like, oh, this is mysterious, you know. And now they're gonna really get into it and take it apart, really tear it apart and put it back together. What a great development.
And you get to see all of them when they do their black belt test. So
that's right. Yeah.
Good times. I think we're still one of the only organizations that all of the black belts still has to go through headquarters.
I would say we're probably the only.
I know there's a couple of them in the traditional side. I don't know how many in like the Kenpo world do that, but I know there's a couple in the traditional side where they have the same kind of concept.
Right. Well, that of course is it's a must be, really, because otherwise, again, the old telephone game. Mm-hmm. You know, by 3 generations, it's not the same system, and by 6, it doesn't even resemble the same system.
Right. I think you told a story about Ed Parker seeing that, and the only thing he recognized when he went to a test was the names of the techniques or something.
That hurt. I got to tell you, that hurt me to hear that. It really did. That hurt me. What a statement. I sit on these boards, I watch the tests, and the only thing I recognize is the names of the techniques. My God. That's horrible. I mean, what a sinking feeling he must have had. And then, of course, he had to promote these people in his system, in the name of his system, but they weren't doing it.
Right.
Oh, terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. But there was no video at that time. Mm-hmm. There was no way that that everybody could come through headquarters unless he went to them or they came to him. And we're talking worldwide.
Yeah, that's a difficult logistics equation.
It's an impossible one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not just difficult, it's impossible. He just came along at the right and the wrong time. The right time because he was the pioneer. He was the father of American karate because he started the first commercial dojo on the mainland, because at that time in 1957, Hawaii was not yet a state. Mm-hmm. So he started the first commercial karate school in America. Hawaii was still Hawaii, like Puerto Rico is still Puerto Rico. So he has that distinction, and nobody can dispute that. Nobody tries. So, but it wasn't long after that it just, it went bada bing, bada boom, and so on. Mm-hmm. I think I told you that when I first started, I signed a little contract with him.
We mentioned that one time, but let's talk about it a little further. What was the contract?
The contract was, and everybody signed this in the beginning. The contract was that you would teach no one except your immediate family.
That's a very traditional Chinese contract.
Mm-hmm. So I felt I was joining like a secret society. Mm-hmm. Really, I mean, and he interviewed you. Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to take this art? And for me, it was easy. I'm in terrible physical condition. I haven't done anything since I got out of the Marine Corps. I've been, working and so on, but I mean, nothing really working out, physical. I never could understand the idea of lifting. That was not an option for me at all. Going to a gym. In fact, in those days, what was a gym? It was Vic Tanny's, and they had a few dumbbells around, and not all of them metal.
Concrete and rock.
Right. And I just couldn't get into that idea at all. And when I saw this, I said, to me, this is like, first of all, I'm going to get in good physical condition because I've seen your workout. Mm-hmm. These guys are standing in a puddle of their own sweat. That impressed me. I said, I got to do that because I haven't done that since I was a Marine. And I said, secondly, what you're teaching here to me is like an insurance policy. You buy it because you know you need it, and you hope you never need it. But you got to have it.
Yeah, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
Absolutely. And that's what the art is to me. And how many fights have I been in since I've been in the art? Only in tournaments. Every now and then you find some fool that's really fighting, so you got to fight back. But if they're doing it right, now it's still freestyle. If they're not, then you're fighting. And I've been there already. And one time a guy hit me in the face and I busted his ribs. Huh? He came back to me later and he's holding his side. He said, "A good match." I said, "It was a terrible match. You're out there to take my head off." Oh. He said, "Yeah." I could tell the difference. I got a cheek that's swelling up and an eye closing.
I don't think you were pulling those, boss.
No, I don't think so. Yeah. No, I know you weren't. No, there was no control in some of these. In the first internationals, I remember standing next to Ed Parker when the doctor walked across the hall. This was in the what do they call it?
Sports arena?
No, it wasn't the sports arena. It was before that. The municipal auditorium. It was the old one. There's a new municipal auditorium, but this is something old. The old one was just an amphitheater. A balcony floor, and they could put in risers and seating. And the guy walked across. I just had to be standing next to Ed, and he walks up and he says, "Mr. Parker, you got to do something about the control here." He says, "I just counted 8 knockouts walking across the floor." And this is on hardwood floors. So when these guys went down,
yeah, it's a double knockout.
It's a double knockout. Yeah, I mean, I'm amazed that nobody has been killed.
Well, especially with all the modern science where they're looking at all the concussion syndromes and all the stuff that's happening with that.
Yeah. I remember a match. Guy named Scott Loring, one of our guys, big, rough, tough kid. I remember when he was brand new. He was just a white belt, and I was teaching, and I used to do this thing where I wanted to use hands only or feet only, and I would tie their belts together so that they only had a half a belt length between them, and use hands only. And you gotta learn how to block because you're in such close proximity. It was easy not to be able to control it. And then we used to we'd take and put our hands behind our belts, tuck them in, and use our feet only. And the other guy could use his hands, you could only use your feet. And just as an exercise. And we didn't do this all the time, but I did it enough. And I remember the night that Scott Loring was doing it, and he kept coming in on these guys, and I kept trying to tell him, you have to acknowledge what they're doing. When they kick you in the groin, you've been kicked in the groin. Just the fact that they didn't actually make contact, you have to acknowledge that. Act as though you have been. So I tried it with my hands there, and he got it, and he finally picks me up, and he's going to slam me down, and that's what I grabbed him, and clapped his ears, and I hit him a couple of times, and he dropped me. He says, "Oh, I thought you couldn't use your hands." I said, "When you're about to dump me on my head, believe me, my hands are coming out." And that's what I told him. I said, "Scott, I've just kicked you in the groin 3 times," and I said, "Had I just let him go, I said, we wouldn't be having this conversation."
Yeah.
And I get, but he was just that. Well, I tell you, I don't know if this is the first or the second. It was right early on, or very early on, because the internationals didn't really get sorted out for a few years. Mm-hmm. It wasn't. I mean, the first year was a fiasco. The second year was as bad as the first year, really. But maybe just a little more controlled. And by the third year, it was beginning to look a little bit like a tournament rather than a brouhaha free-for-all. And anyhow, it was one of those years. Scott was in a match, and I won't mention the other guy's name because it isn't important. But he was quite well known at the time. And the guy drove him out of bounds, Scott out of bounds, and they yelled, "Stop." The referee and judges stop, and Scott did. He dropped his hands, and the guy hit him in the face. Well, he didn't say a word. Came back in the ring, got in his spot, and when they said, "Hajime," Loring launched. I mean, he was in a sprint mode at the time, and before this other guy could put his hands up, he nailed him in the chest. I mean, absolutely dead in the chest. The guy went down and started flipping around like a fish out of water.
Oof.
Yeah. And the doctor came along, and as I recall, he gave him a shot in the chest, in the heart.
Like an adrenaline shot?
Yeah.
Ooh, wow.
Which I'm sure saved his life.
Yeah, that's not good. You got to go to that level.
Yeah, and and I remember Scott just walked back, bowed, and left. I mean, he didn't wait for him to say, "You're out." I saw the same thing happen with Joe Louis one time. Oof. Three of us were standing up on the risers. They were using the risers at this time, but not for the eliminations. And Louis was fighting, and one of the guys said, "I wonder what's going on over there," because some guy had his finger and his point right in Louis's face. And I said, "Uh-oh."
That's not going to go good.
I said, he's trying to tell him how it is. And I said, "This is not good." And so they came back, and they bowed, and the guy was aggressive. He moved right in on Louis, and Louis was backing up. And I thought, that's unusual. Louis just usually was the aggressor, but he was backing up. And man, all of a sudden he launched with that infamous back fist of his. The guy backed up, and he did a side thrust kick that took the guy. He took out 3 rows of seats, spectators and all, but there wasn't many spectators, fortunately. There's only a couple of people that were involved. And then they went over to attend him, and I remember Joe walking back, taking his spot, bowing and leaving. Same thing. No words, no nothing. He was just, no, you didn't do that with Joe.
I know I'm getting DQ'd for that, so I'm just going to take off.
Yeah.
Okay, so since we're in that time period, I cheated. I had a few people who knew that I was going to come do this interview, gave me some questions. So since we're in that time period, here's a good one. So how did you go from training with Ed Parker to co-owning the only partnership-owned school in IKCA history?
Okay, well, boy. Now you over the can of worms.
I like worms.
Well, no, that all happened because at the time I was a brown belt. I was, a face in the crowd. I was one of the advanced class, and there were many of us, and there were 3 black belts: Rich Montgomery, Jimmy Brown, and Rick Flores. Those are the only 3 black belts that Ed had made at that time. And then came along a guy by the name of James Wing Wu, and Ed had found him in San Francisco, got acquainted with him, and he was a kung fu practitioner, and Ed was writing his second book, The Secrets of Chinese Karate, which was pretty much along the lines of kung fu. So he asked Jimmy if he would like to collaborate with him on the book. So they began collaborating on the book. Ed already had a real good start on the book. I mean, he'd been working on it for some time. And Jimmy Woo came along, and I don't know what his contribution was, how much or whatever, but within a couple of months, really, Ed Parker was building his dynasty at that time. I mean, I'd have to say he was the hardest working man I've ever known. He really was. Ed was going, I don't know how much sleep he got, but it couldn't have been a whole lot, because I'd worked with him later on. I've worked him into the wee hours, and I'd be driving home, and but I knew the next night I was going to get a good night's sleep. I'm not sure he did. Really, I mean, every night was he'd work into the wee hours, and he'd be up again the next morning. He'd meet himself coming and going. He was all over the place all the time. Well, at this particular time with Jimmy Woo, he made a fatal mistake. He turned his advanced class over to Jimmy whenever he found that he was too far away, he couldn't make it on time or whatever, and he gave him a little latitude, he gave him a little breathing room. He should never have done it, because Jimmy Woo had an agenda of his own, and it was very, very clear very quickly. He started selling the guys, being their instructor. They were listening to him, and he started planting the seeds. Ed Parker isn't moving fast enough with taking over the country with schools and so on and so forth. We could do a much better job. Ed Parker has taught you everything he knows, so why would you continue with him when I can teach you the good stuff, the secrets, the things you don't know? It's kind of funny, too, because at the time, I didn't like that. I didn't like some of the talk that was going on. And I actually, for a while, was only going 1 night a week to the class. The other night I was studying fencing, just because it was fun, it was different, and so on. And like I said, the guys that go out afterwards, I wouldn't go out. I'd go home. And then one night I walked into the studio, and there's nobody there. And whoever was there, a couple of guys. One of them says to me, "What are you doing here?" I came to work out. I came to the class. Oh boy, it happened, huh? Something's happened here. Oh yeah, didn't you hear? You don't know about it? I said, no. Because I was kind of out of the loop at that particular time. I wasn't as tight as I had been. And I said, okay, I get it. I mean, I knew immediately what had happened. And so I called Ed the next day and I said, where do we go from here? He says, you're with me? I said, absolutely. And the three guys came down. Jimmy, a guy by the name of Leonard Myers, and I forget who the third guy was, came down to my shop, and they said, you're part of this group. And I said, yeah. And they said, you're welcome with us. I said, I realize that. I said, but thanks anyway. I said, oh, okay. There's no pressure. I mean, they didn't come down and say, you got to come with us. No, and it wasn't like that. And boy, what a mistake those guys made. Really, what a mistake. Because I never heard of any of them after that. I mean, nobody did anything. Nobody amounted to anything in the world of martial arts or at all, to my knowledge. I never heard about any of them. Nothing happened with them at all. So at that point, ta-da, it's fantastic. I was able to teach. Up until that point, I had maybe taken over a class when Ed Parker would go into the office or something like that at the end of a class. Mm-hmm. And Rich Montgomery didn't happen to be there for some reason, and neither did Jimmy Abra. And it kind of went down the line, and I might get chosen to come out and do a little bit of stuff, but I've never really done any teaching. And then Ed said to me, can you come in and start teaching? I said, absolutely. And I thought, what the hell am I going to teach? Oh my God, this is, oh wow. So I started developing a plan right away. And I knew who the guys were, because basically what happened was the intermediate class became the advanced class, mm-hmm. And then we started making brown belts and so on and so forth, and they became a legitimate advanced class. But it took a while. But in the meantime, they were still called the advanced class. And then, like I said, I had the man's ear. And one of the first things I said was, I love your books. They're great. But the thing about Kenpo, you gotta see it move. Mm-hmm. You gotta see it move. Pictures, photographs, verbal descriptions don't do anything.
It's too static.
Absolutely. And the dynamics, the kinetic dynamics that we have going for us are just so impressive. So I said, let's make some films. So we got a hold. Ed had a 16mm camera, because Ed would trade anything for lessons. Anything. I mean, you wanted to barter? Leilani told my wife one time, she says, we have a basement full of junk. She said that Ed has bartered for stuff we'll probably never use, but he'll take anything you got. And, dental work, whatever. And he was great on bartering. And he had this 16 millimeter camera, this big wind-up thing. But I mean, this was the kind of a camera, when you wound it up, you could shoot for quite a long time. 16 millimeter was getting to be a professional medium. In fact, when we did the movie The Killing Zone with PM Entertainment, that was the last of their 16 millimeter productions. After that, they went to 35 millimeter. But I'll tell you look at that movie, The Killing Zone, and man, it looks like it was shot on 35. It's good. The production value of the story kind of sucks, but the production, the acting isn't real great either. But anyhow, we did the best we could. It's a fun little movie. But as far as the production value is concerned, I mean, the stuff really looks good. So 16 millimeter is getting to be quite a thing. 8 millimeter was getting to be really good. Super 8 was sound. And then all of a sudden came video, and Super 8 was forgotten.
Yep.
That was going to get to be a real good medium for people that wanted to have sound. But that didn't happen. And, of course, video was terrible for the first umpteen years. Ed Parker and I had one of the first video recording outfits available through Sony, the CV2000. It was a big walnut cabinet. It had a 9-inch pop-up black and white little monitor, and it had reel-to-reel videotape, 1 hour, and they were about 9-inch reels, and they cost $75 a piece.
In 1961.
In 1961, 62, this was probably about, mid-60s, about 64, 65. Anyway, a lot of money in those days. So you used it until you couldn't repair it anymore, and you threw it away and got another, you broke down and spent another $75 for another reel of tape. Of a couple of which I have. I still got them, and I would love to be able to see them, except there's nothing to watch them on. In fact, at one point, it had been several years, and I hadn't seen some of the stuff I have, and I realized Tom Bleecker was talking about a video outfit that Bruce Lee had. Thank you. And he said, he told me what it was, and I said, you know what? I said, that's the same one I had, only he had the industrial model, I had the home model. I said, could I borrow that? And I did. And in those days, just because you had the same unit didn't necessarily mean you could watch your tapes. They were so, Proprietary, yeah. That even though you recorded on the same outfit, that didn't necessarily mean it was going to play on somebody else's, even though the same model and make and everything else. But it did, and that was nice too. But back to Jimmy Woo. We get finished with him, and now we're off onto the movies. So we made these 8 millimeter films, and we sold them worldwide for a while. And what curious about that was we had, I believe we started with a full page ad in Black Belt magazine, and it was pretty reasonable until Black Belt developed and created their own films. We were the first. We were the first ones out there with training films, silent films. We gave descriptions and so on. We did, again, the best we could without sound. But without sound, you're so limited. And even through the amount. I mean, the amount that you could shoot, just so limited. But we gave it a shot, and I'm glad we did, because those films are still kicking around. They're on the internet, and they show it. They show Kenpo at its roots.
Yeah, we've got it up on the IKCA website right now for free.
Right. Yeah. You want to watch them there, like you said, on the IKCA website for free, and they show Ed and I, and Ed was I don't know if it was generosity, or if it was I don't know what it was, but I mean, he had me doing half and he was doing half, and we would dummy for each other. I was willing to dummy all the way through. Oh, here's a good one. When I came up with the proposal, because of who he was and who I was at the time, everything and nothing, really, I said to him, I want to make these films and so on. I said, you're going to be, the guy doing the most of the work and everything. And I said, so we'll do this on a 60-40 proposition, if you feel that's fair. And he said, no. I thought, I overstepped my bounds. He's thinking 25-75, 70-30, 80-20, 90-10.
95-5.
95-5, right. And who the hell are you? And I remember, and he said, no, Chuck, he says, got to be 50-50, otherwise, he says, it's not going to work. And I thought, what a wise man, really. Because, it was working. Of course, what I also didn't realize was, at the time, he had no intention of laying out the syllabus. He says, you lay it out, you tell me what you want me to do, and I'll do it. And I thought, that's a lot of responsibility for me.
Yeah.
Who better to do it than him? Well, he didn't have time. He was willing to do everything. He was willing to, give this whole thing a shot. But he really didn't have the time to do it. He made the time, but he didn't have the time. He certainly didn't have the time to do all this extra work. So I was the one that had to do all of that, and I did it happily. And that gave me a leg up on later on, and later on, and later on, and so on, until we got to the Karate Connection. And, laying it out was something that I'd done before. So it's just another chapter in the book.
Okay.
So and then as far as the studio, that's where I made a mistake. I really did. I should not have created a studio. I should have stuck closer physically to Ed.
Okay.
Because what I wanted was, well, first of all, I wanted a shorter commute. Because when I get off work at Crenshaw and Slauson in L.A., I had to drive either to West L.A. and then back to Southgate, or I had to drive to Pasadena and then back to Southgate, or to Southgate to Pasadena. And so I thought, boy, wouldn't it be nice to have a studio right here? And being that my business was talking to guys all day long.
Yeah, clientele stream.
Oh, my God, I had a built-in clientele. I mean, the first thing, if the guy was anywhere within the age group that we catered to, I'd be talking karate to him. Mm-hmm. And I filled up that dojo with haircut customers.
Yeah, that's an easy way to get people in.
Absolutely. And it worked. It worked brilliantly. So, my idea was to have a place closer to my shop and physically, someplace I could get off work, grab a bite, and get down there and teach for 3 hours, which is what happened. And but I really should have stayed a lot closer to him because he was so close to the film industry, and I could have gotten a lot closer to that at that time. And that's where I should have been. Mm. I should really have been there, rather than being an instructor at a studio, at a school. It was not a good move, but it worked at the time, and I sure had a tremendous amount of fun. And the guys that I taught at that school, you still see on Dinner with Chuck today. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've made friends out of that place. I would have made other friends, but I wouldn't give up the ones I've made. These guys are precious to me. So, was it a mistake? Yes, maybe. Was it a mistake? No, not really. It was great. We had some great times down there. A lot of blood, sweat, and tears went on those mats. Both the tatami and the the ones that we spread across those grass mats were terrible. That painter's canvas. It was just there was no footing. In fact, we would have to take a couple of Pepsi bottles, put your thumb on, and sprinkle the mats to make them wet so you get some footing before we freestyle. Yeah. Talk about makeshift. And then we finally got tatami. Whoopee! That was a happy day. And everybody's...
Those are great right until they get sweat on them, and then they feel like concrete.
Well, if they get wet, then they blow up like a balloon. Mm-hmm. Then they're no good at all. But, yeah. And if they get used and compacted, yeah, they're just about as bad as the floor. Mm-hmm. So, but again, we used to do it on the floor, so what?
Yeah, I came up in my very first style I ever studied. We had a gym floor, and it was wood, and there's times you hit that wood hard enough, you swear to God that you see the nails pop up through the wood, and the dust cloud hits up, and of course it doesn't happen that way, but sometimes you hit hard enough that it really feels that way. So, yeah, that's always interesting. So, yeah, I went back and did the double check on this one once I got the question, and that is the only record I can find of there was a partnership-owned school. Everybody else's was a franchise.
Right.
So that was kind of a cool little tidbit in history there.
Right. Or not necessarily even franchise. A lot of people just kind of tithed.
Yeah.
They didn't really pay a franchise fee.
They were a membership.
They were a membership school, and they give them like 10% of what they're taking in or whatever to be that membership school, right? Mm-hmm.
So, cool.
Yep.
When I was doing my research and my homework here, kind of coincidental with another question somebody else sent in, but There was a interview you did with Masters Magazine where you said that you had gotten a chance to freestyle with Ed Parker several times, and I happen to know how much you enjoy freestyling. So, tell us about what it was like to freestyle with Ed Parker.
Scary. He's a big man. He's a big man, and he's a powerful man. I mean, his power was legendary, literally. And you knew that if, somebody my size, I'd get hit. Well, I had the advantage because I'd probably fly away. I wouldn't stand there long enough to get hit so badly. I just, take it and fly away. I just get brushed off like a fly. The only thing that kept me alive was my speed, my ability to get in and get out. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I get in and get make a mistake. Timing is off or whatever. No, it was, and he was being nice. He wasn't pissed off. I mean, he was anything. I mean, we were freestyling, and the man had excellent control until you were in a mass attack. And then, I tell you, one of the funny, I picked up a bruise one time from my knee to my upper thigh. And I know the man's foot isn't that long. I don't know how I bruised with one kick that far. Man, oh man, I thought I was going to be crippled for life. And it was at a demonstration. And one time we were at a demonstration, and he was my uke, and he afterwards he told me, he says, "You almost dropped me. I got to want to check chop behind the neck, doing thundering hammers, mm-hmm. or repeating hammers." And my control was just a bit off. It didn't feel like anything to me though, really. Mm-hmm. I remember making contact. But he told me, so he said, I spun and I saw the stars, and he said, I just caught myself before I went down.
Yeah, those cervical neck strikes are really easy to overdo it real quick.
Really, yeah, it's so easy to just, too much. Anyway, mass attacks. I think the funniest one I ever saw was Big John Walker, one of our guys. Was like, you wanted to be the first or the second guy in. You never wanted to be the third or the fourth, and God help you if there was five, and you had to be the fifth guy in. Well, sometimes, these things are all choreographed. They're programmed. But that usually goes away after the second guy. And then he starts moving because you're coming in and he's moving. And what happened with Big John was he got cut off by somebody. He was supposed to be like the second guy in. Well, he got cut off by somebody who's just, the timing was off or whatever. And so then he's trying to work his way in, but then another guy's coming, then another guy's he's trying to work. Now all of a sudden, everybody's down but Jim but Johnny and Ed. And they're facing each other. And Big John waves his hands at them and sits on the mats and lays down. And the crowd went nuts. This is at one of the internationals.
That's awesome.
The crowd went nuts, man. It was like, no, I'm done. He just laid down like, you got me. I'm done. I'm finished.
Oh, that's great.
Big John Walker told me one night, we were having pizza, and he says, do you remember the time on La Cienega Boulevard when he had... There's another whole story. This is we don't have enough time for this one. But Big John had just come out of San Quentin, and we didn't know that. He had done 7 years for safecracking with explosives, and he had been into a whole lot of other stuff. But anyway, he had quite a history, and none of us knew that. Well, a place like San Quentin, he told me later on, he said that if you're up for parole, there are guys that will bust your parole just to keep you there because they can't get out. That's just for spite. Mm-hmm. You're getting out? No, you ain't. Because if you fight, your parole's busted.
Right.
Doesn't make any difference who you're fighting, or who's right or who's wrong, or who started or whatever, or if you're defending your life. And he said it was another convict who happened along at the time this guy was gonna make John fight for his life, and the guy told him, he says, you bust his parole, he says, I'll kill you. And everybody knew this guy, and everybody knew he wasn't just talking. He meant what he said. So John said, I owe him my freedom, my life, basically. He said, because I was going to have to fight this guy to stay alive, because he was going to get me with a shiv. Anyhow, so Big John, he said, do you remember that time on La Cienega Boulevard? I said, yeah. He said, "You killed my arm. You killed it." He said, I had to work left-handed. He was a sound man for ABC TV, ABC News. And he was part of a team. They had a cameraman, a sound man, and an announcer, a reporter that would go out on whatever, during the day and bring their film back and so on. Film at 11. And so he was the sound guy, and he said I had to operate all my things with my left hand, and I'm right-handed because you killed my arm. And I said, I remember that. I said, I remember you raised your hand. I was teaching blocking, and he's a Big John. He didn't get the name because he's tiny, so big man. And it's kind of funny because I'm not. And I remember the incident because I remember him raising his hand, and he's teaching inward blocks, outward block, and he says, "Does this stuff work?" And I thought, that's a strange question. And all of a sudden I realized the man's a mountain. And he's thinking to himself, if I want to hit you in the head, I'm going to hit you in the head. These little puny-ass blocks that you're doing aren't going to stop me from hitting you in the head. I'm going to take your head clean off if I want to. And I said, well, John, I said, yeah, they really do. And I said, so now we're going to have to find out. Now you're going to have to throw on me. Oh, no, I don't want to do that, kiddo. Call everybody kiddo. Call the old man kiddo. I'm sure he called the warden kiddo.
He was a giant dude. So
everybody's kiddo. So I said, no, it's too late for that, John. I said, it's too late. I said, now you got me wondering, and I said, I can't afford to wonder about this stuff. I cannot afford that. So now you're going to have to throw on me. And I said, when you do, I said, don't hold back, because if you do, we're not gonna find out anything. You won't prove anything by doing that. So he said, oh, okay, and he threw, and I did an inward block, and I stopped his blow. And I think he might have moved me physically on the mat. I might have slid a little bit, but I didn't go away, and I certainly, the block held.
Yeah, I'll take the moving as the entire body versus that block collapsing and take it in the face.
Absolutely.
Any day of the week.
Absolutely. So, and I don't even know if I did that, but anyhow, the block held, and I said, do it again. And he said, no, that was enough. And I said, you're sure? And he said, yeah, okay, let's go on. So we went on. Well, it was like a couple of years or more later that he brought this up, because, like I said, I'd have pizza and beer, whatever, after a tournament. And he told me, he says, you killed my arm. And he said, I thought to myself, now this is a quote, he said, I thought to myself, that little prick didn't have to hit me that hard.
Well, he was going to hit you that hard. So
well, and I told him, I said, John, I said, I didn't hit you at all. I said, that was your power transfer. He said, I know that now. He said, I didn't know it then.
That's awesome.
Oh, God, the stuff that's happened over the years, it's been such fun. I forget who I was talking to one time. This guy, I believe he was dying of cancer, but I think he owned a supply store, and we just got to talking. He looks at me and he says, "You've really had a lot of fun doing this, haven't you?" I said, "You bet I have."
Yep.
You bet I have. It's been nothing but fun.
So, dovetailing off of some of those early year stories, you just told the story about Big John and the inward block. Every time I've ever seen you at a seminar, you take the most junior students and teach them yourselves. And in numerous interviews, I've heard you make the comment that the job of teaching the most junior students, so typically, white, yellow, orange level, that should belong to the most senior guy in place, because that's how they get the best instruction, right? So
that's my feeling, yeah.
Do you think it was at the Crenshaw School where you developed that kind of a teaching philosophy? Or let me rephrase that. Where was it that you developed that teaching philosophy where it had, the senior guy should be the one in charge of the most junior ones?
Basically, it was after, because it was, I was the guy that taught them all their basics. And it's funny, because it seems like everybody's first group is their best. Mm-hmm. Why is that?
Well, most of the time it's because they turn the teaching over to somebody else, and somebody else and somebody else.
Exactly. I mean, you take Norris's guys. His first group was the best he had, and I don't know many others, but I can assume, because that's how it is. And so I remember when Vic opened up his school in '81 on Hawthorne Boulevard, and that's when we got the name, the karate, because everything was the connection at it, the gold connection, the this connection, the car connection, whatever. So I said, well, do the karate connection. Okay, fine. And we did. And he said, I said, so what time is the beginning class? He said, well, you're not going to teach that. You only teach the advanced. And I said, no, I'm going to teach the beginners. Well, why? I said, it's because it's the basics, Vic. I said, who taught you your basics? He said, well, you did. Exactly. I said, would you rather have had somebody else? Well, no. I said, there you go. No, that is so important. The basics are so important. Well, they're the foundation. They're the bedrock of the system, any system. And if you don't get good basics, to me, it's like the blind leading the blind. You turn the basics over to a brown belt, and he wants to emulate you, so, well, I'm too good to be teaching this. So he turns it over to a green belt, who turns it over to a purple belt. Eventually, you got an orange belt teaching your basics, and you got the blind leading the blind. He doesn't know his basics, especially he's been taught to by somebody that didn't know him to begin with. Mm-hmm. Or not didn't know him, but certainly not the way, the head instructor knows him. So that's why I always insisted on teaching the beginners, teaching the basics. And I remember Ed Parker telling me one time, I can't teach beginners anymore. I said, really? No, wow. I said, that's when you see the biggest leap of advancement in the beginners. You see people that really don't know nothing about defending themselves, going to be able to defend themselves quite adequately in a short period of time. Now, as far as being able to do all the things that we do later on, attack and so on and so forth, that takes longer. But I said, boy, once they get their blocking and their maneuvering and their juxtapositioning down, they become. How many times have you seen two black belts spar? I mean, and they go like minutes at a time, and neither one can score a point on the other.
Yeah, it's the ones that are really good. You see that all the time.
Yeah, all the time. Why?
Because they got the good basics.
That's right, and they've their defenses are so good. You take and you put that guy on the street. How is some poor slob on the street ever going to get to him? I mean, he's going to think, just what have I run into here? Oh, I've seen that so many times, and it feels good when you're freestyling somebody who is really at your level. Steve Sanders and I we had some fantastic matches. I mean, they'd last minutes at a time, and neither one of us would really score a meaningful point, and then all of a sudden he would. Steve was one of those guys. I'll tell you a good one about that. Steve would always peel off to my right, to his left, going backwards, and so I thought to myself, I use the old Western expression, cut him off at the pass. So he'll still do it. I'll cut him off this. Well, that doesn't happen because he sees that and he moves someplace else. So that just doesn't happen. And I mean, you try everything you can with a guy like him. And so one night we're freestyling and nothing extraordinary, but I just got off the dime a lot quicker than he expected, and I was on top of him. I mean, on top of him. And I inadvertently, now I've done this on purpose many, many times. I'll step on your foot, I'll trap your foot. I'll trap your lead foot so that you can't get away so I can get you. Well, with him I did it inadvertently. I didn't mean to but I was on him that hard, that fast, and I punched him in the mouth. I mean, I got him square in the mouth. He had a tooth came through his below his lower lip, and it cut my knuckle. That's how deep it went. Mm-hmm. And I remember he started dropping. I grabbed him. And I'm like, oh my God, Steve, you all right? And his eyes are doing the old gumball thing, rolling around. And he finally came around, and it's like my tooth, and I said, don't let it come out. Mm-hmm. Bite it down, keep it in, just don't let it come out. And next day he went to the dentist, and the dentist told him, he said, best thing you could have done. He says, because when it's out, it's out. And he said, we got to put a fake one in. He said, but now he said they will reseat themselves if you can keep them in there long enough. So he did, and. About 2 weeks later, we're freestyling again. And I got a hold of him, and I got him turned, and I'm going to be able to plow him in the ribs. And in a flash, I thought, this is really, really uncanny. And a foot came up between us, and there was no space between us. I don't know how he did that. The man's a contortionist, because his foot came up and caught me with a heel under my chin that lifted me off the mat. And I remember thinking to myself, my jaws were clenched, and I remember my thinking to myself, if I open my mouth, I'm going to see all my teeth drop onto the mat. I thought, oh my God, and I opened my mouth, and it was like, you could hear my jaw, Oh, he said it wasn't payback, but I don't know. No, it wasn't.
A little bit of a receipt, maybe?
It wasn't. No, he just, it was just, it's what happens. I mean, you catch him like that, and boy, that, I got to tell you, I didn't think you'd get a piece of newspaper between us, let alone a foot.
Especially the heel.
The heel.
From that position,
yeah. Come up with a heel like that. God.
Efren was good at that, too.
Who?
Efren Palacios.
Oh, yeah.
He was really good at getting a foot someplace, and you didn't think there was a foot anywhere near there.
That's right. Yeah. No, Efren was fantastic at that. Yeah, he was very Sanders-like, well, Muhammad-like. I'm sorry, Steve. I still have a tough time. You were Steve Sanders for me for so long, and then we didn't see each other for so long, and then all of a sudden I heard you're Muhammad, and it's like, okay, but
yeah, I'm sure
the
he
brain
doesn't
catch
either.
up.
Yeah. Quite certain he doesn't get offended by that. So
I certainly hope not.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about present era now that we've had a whole lot of fun stuff in the early years. The IKCA now has over 600 black belts on the family tree. How do you feel knowing that you have made Kenpo training available to so many people worldwide?
Feel great. Yeah, because until video came along, you were relegated to what you had locally, and that's all you had. And like, all right, for instance, testing. Why do we test? Well, we test because you have to see what the person's doing, in order to elevate them in rank. And rank is it's the old, little pat on the hindy that makes everybody feel good, and that's what it's all about. In some systems, they don't have anything like that, and they get along all right also, I guess. So, is it needed? I don't know, but it's the way it was when I came up, and like with the belt, the whole belt thing, colored belts. In the beginning, it was white, brown, and black. In fact, in the beginning, it was white. I mean, back in the few centuries ago, everybody got a garment, and the belt is what held it together, and you wrapped it up, you carried it by your belt, and the tradition was to wash your garment, but never the belt. So what happened? The belt became dirty. Well, it's like in the military when your fatigues get faded out. They get what in the Marine Corps we call it salty, because I guess back in the day they washed them with salt water. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, so you became salty, and you could look at a guy and you could tell how long he's been in roughly just by the how bleached out his uniform was. Well, then eventually that thing falls apart, and in the case of martial arts, I can see somebody saying, I can't go back to a white belt. I mean, come on. I worked too hard. I've got too much blood, sweat, and tears into this belt, but it fell apart. I can't use it. Honey, would you dye my belt black for me, please? I can see. I remember Ed saying at the time, we were white, brown, and black. Hey, he said, I love, somebody asked one time, I think it was a journalist, it was at a demonstration on La Cienega Boulevard, and he said, can you describe your art in just a few words? And Ed, without hesitation, he says, yes, it's organized, scientific, dirty fighting. And I liked it. I liked that. That to me, that made all the sense in the world. Organized, scientific, dirty fighting. Because there's no other fighting when it comes to fighting. I mean, there's only one kind. Anyway, I got off track now.
Went into the belt system.
Oh, the belt system. Yeah, thank you. The belt system. Yeah. So when several of us wanted to go to the colored belt system, because we had just, on our white belt, we would get 4 tips, 4 brown stripes, like hash marks in the military. And that designated how high up you were toward brown. And after 4 stripes, it was brown. Well, that took about 2 years, and then you were brown belt for about 2 years. So I began seeing a pattern in tournaments, And Norris's guys were winning all of the lower belt divisions. When it came to black belt, his guys were the same as everybody. Some did, some didn't. Some got better, some dropped out, whatever. But in the lower divisions, he was taking them all. And all of a sudden, one day, I thought to myself, of course he is. Because I found out that his guys took about 3 years to get to brown belt. We were getting brown in 2, but we were 2 years as brown belts. Mm-hmm. So what did that mean? That meant for a whole year, he had people that were brown belts who were fighting in the white belt division. Mm-hmm. And then by the time they were brown belts, they were second-year brown belts, so they were winning brown belt divisions, a lot of them. So it gave them a distinct advantage. Now, I don't believe that Chuck deliberately did that at all. I don't think that was for that reason at all. I think that's simply the tradition that it was in his system, and that's how he did it. And it just happened that it turned out to be real advantageous for him. So, I mean, I never brought it up to him. Why? Why would I? Mm-hmm. And in fact, if I had him shoot, he said, "Oh, okay, yeah, thanks a lot." You know?
I never noticed that before.
Cool, but I want to add, and I said to him, I said, "We got to do the color belt system, and we got to take 3 years for brown." Oh no. First of all, that's the color belt system is Korean. We're not Korean. I said, I don't care if it's Ubangi. I don't care who. It's a good idea, Ed. I said it's a good idea. And no, we can't do that. Color belt, no. And 3 years for brown, no. It's always been 2 years for brown, 2 years as a brown. So, I think finally somebody convinced him that the color belt also was a good idea financially. Mm-hmm. You get to sell a new belt instead of somebody putting it. And there was no uniformity to the tips that we were putting on. Mm-hmm. Some guys use brown tape, some guys use brown marking pen, some guys, I don't know what, I don't want to say what they might have used, but I mean, put a brown stripe in it, you know, and it was all different. They were different lengths, different widths, different everything. So this would bring sort of a uniformity to it that we didn't have before. And so finally, when somebody rang the cash register, cha-ching, and he realized that was a good idea, and it was a good idea, he did it. But never the 2 years for brown. I mean, never changed that. So it's another case of I won the battle, but I lost the war. Mm-hmm. I won a lot of battles, but he still always won the war, mm-hmm. Which is as it should be. All right. Anyway, getting back to
we're at we're over 600 black belts now.
Right. Yeah, but no, there was the theme of the 600. Well,
so I was asking how you felt that now you've about 600 people plus now around the entire world that have been able to earn their black belts in Kenpo. Some of them probably would have figured it out at a local school, but you've got 600 that have now come through the IKCA, where in some cases that wouldn't have been the case at all for them to get any kind of training.
Right, that's true, yeah. Somebody said, one-on-one training is the best kind of training you can get. I agree. Providing, depending on who your instructor is. Mm-hmm. So, in this case, we had people that, when Vic and I created the whole thing, I was over 30 years in the art. He was over 25, so we had over 55 years of experience together. Mm-hmm. And when we put it together, he had ideas, I had ideas, and by working together, I was used to doing everything on 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper. You write this, you write that, and you get reams of paper before you know it. And you got them with dividers, and oh my God, trying to find anything in there is a nightmare, mm-hmm. especially back in the days before I could even type. It's all by hand, and Vic came up with the idea. He says, let's put it on a board across this whole 12 feet of wall space, and using Post-its. Mm. And we'll do this here. We got to have that there. Wait a minute. This should be earlier. We're waiting too long. This should be later. We're jumping the gun on this one. So by being able to look at the whole thing, great idea. We look at we could see the whole system right up there in front of us, and it was easy to see what was where and how it was fitting in and how it was going to position itself against something else and so on. It really made it great. So, and of course, my idea was less is more. I felt that because the early guys thought that Ed Parker hadn't taught them enough, that he said, "You want more? I'll give you more." for a few years, basically, we learned a new technique a week. Well, you add that up over a few years, and that's 150 techniques plus what we had. Plus, it got to the point where your mind is only capable of retaining so much.
Practically, yeah.
Practically, absolutely.
Yeah, you can do the whole encyclopedia thing, but trying to make that practical is really difficult.
It's impossible. It really is. It's impossible. You can't. People were walking around with the big red book, and you'd ask them, you know this or that? They'd look it up. Oh yeah, I know that one. Really? You know it? No, you don't. You've had it. You learned it, but you don't know it.
Yeah, you can't own it.
You can't even come close to it. So consequently, when he did it in '81, when he opened the school, I remember him telling me, he says, I want you to be the head instructor. I said, oh, good. What are we going to teach? He said, well, what are we going to teach? We're going to teach, what the old man teaches. I said, everything? He said, yeah. I said, no. Not interested. Thanks anyway. He said, what? I said, no, Vic. I said, you can't. I said, well, how many black belts have you made in the last few years? People get at the blue belt and they look in front of them and they say, oh my God, I got that much yet to learn. They look behind them and everything they learn, and it's like, geez, I can't do this. Mm-hmm. As a result, people just weren't getting all the way. Did they have enough? Probably. They still had enough to go out and defend themselves. Mm-hmm. But as far as learning it all, it's too monumental a task. So I cut it down by a lot at that point. And Ed Parker used to come to our school, big school, watch what we were doing, loved everything, never said a word to me, never got me aside and say, hey, Chuck, how come you're not, how come you're not teaching this and this and this and this? I'm thinking he's afraid of what I was going to tell him. But he never did.
Or he just saw the quality and was happy.
He saw the quality. He was happy with our black belts, and that's all that counted. He was happy with everybody, really. That's all that counted. Yeah. If he was happy with what we were doing, I was happy. Mm-hmm. And I like doing as much realism as I can. Mm-hmm. We used to go out in between the buildings. There was a driveway asphalt that was kind of beat up, little potholes here and there. And there was one slash of light from the street lamp that would shine to about a third of the driveway, and from there it went from light to dark immediately. And I would have the guys freestyle back and forth in this driveway, and it was about wide enough to where you could really run a guy across and he could run you back, or you could stand in the middle of a fight or whatever you wanted to. And it was great, because it was almost pitch darkness in some spots, and you'd hear oh, damn it, oh sorry. And then you'd be twisting ankles. I tell the guys, I said, next class, I said, wear something you don't mind getting beat up and dirty and tore up, and shoes that don't wear your cowboy boots. Mm-hmm. Wear some soft sole shoes that if somebody does get kicked or whatever, they're not going to get really injured. And that's what we were doing. Oh, we used to do other stuff. I'd have them put the furniture over in the corner. They'd take a couch and a chair and a coffee table, and they'd fight around that, mm-hmm. because that's how it is. Mm-hmm. That's how it happens. Until one day a guy picked up the coffee table and said, oh, stop, put the table down. We're not using weapons yet.
Did anybody go through the table?
Right. Yeah. Now he's going to use the table to bash somebody.
Yeah.
So, but it just, at the Santa Monica school, there was a long hallway and there was doorways. And we'd hide in the doorways, and as people would come that way, we'd attack them.
Run the gauntlet.
Yeah.
Nice.
One night, I said to everybody, you ready? And they said, yeah. And I ran. Shoot. And I was past everybody before they had a chance to say boo. I said, we won't do that from now on. I said, but I just had to test you guys.
Nice.
So anyway.
You had 600 of us now.
600. Yeah, over 600. There are people that could never have studied the art. And again, is it good to have one-on-one instruction? Yeah, when you can. Yeah, if you can, absolutely. Now, some of the best people that we had come through came through with a combination mm-hmm. of instructor and video. That's the best you can get. Mm-hmm. If you got a certified instructor as your instructor and you have the videos, oh my God! I mean, that's wow. I give you a funny. Our very first, Tom Bleeker will jump down my throat every time I say very first. He said, "Is it the first or isn't it the first, Chuck? How can it be the very first?" All right, Tom, you're right.
Shout out Tom Bleeker.
Yes, the first black belt we had come through the video course, and he was part of the school as well. Kid by the name of Matt Robinson. And he told us this story. He says he got the flu, and he said, I was so sick. He said, I was in bed. He said, I couldn't do anything, but I could watch TV at least. So he said, I thought, well, I'll watch their Orange Belt tape. So he said, I started watching your Orange Belt tape. And he said, I watched it so many times, I could literally lip sync along with you when you were saying things. And he said, I do everything. And he said, one night I'm watching it, and I thought to myself, wait, hold. And I had to back it up and say, I never heard that before. And he said, and this was a good piece of information. There is so much information on that Orange Belt tape. He said, I can't believe it, how much information there is. And he said, to watch it just a few times, he says, you're doing yourself a tremendous disservice if you do that. He says, you got to study that tape. He said, I couldn't believe that I had watched it that many times and I had not picked up that piece of information, whether it was something you were demonstrating or just saying or whatever. He said, but it was something I wanted to know, and I'm glad I did. But he said, I couldn't believe it. How could I have watched the tape that many times and not heard that? And he said, I finally figured it out. He said, you guys were sneaking in my bedroom, putting stuff on the tape while I was asleep. He said, because that's the only way I could figure that I didn't hear that all those times. But there's so much information. But that's the beauty of video, really. Mm-hmm. Because in a class, all right, you as an instructor, you know this. Mm-hmm. You're only good for so many times. You can only show something so many times, and then you move on. Mm-hmm. Now, if there's somebody in the classes that doesn't get it, he's just got to get it next time. But there may not be a next time when he's there. Mm-hmm. I'll give you one. What was everybody's favorite Kenpo technique? Everybody's favorite.
I know what my personal favorite is.
Yeah.
I actually really like Gathering the Dragon.
No, I'm talking about not our system. Not in.
Oh, I have no idea. I started with.
Okay, all right. So. Well, it was our variation, and we have a few of them actually. It's called Five Swords.
Okay, I know.
Right, Five Swords, right? Mm-hmm. That's everybody. First of all, it really isn't that great. It doesn't. I mean, when you're doing that heel palm, the guy's going away from you. Yeah. He's not bending over. It's ridiculous. Anyhow, yeah, right. Come to me. Yeah, right. So anyhow, this was everybody's favorite technique in the old Kenpo. And when I was teaching on Crenshaw Boulevard, and then we switched out, then we had to leave there, and we went over onto La Brea in Inglewood. I get this kid. He's coming up the brown belt, and one night we're going over techniques, and we hit on Five Swords again. I mean, that was everybody's favorite, and it was being done all the time. And this kid was almost a brown belt, and he comes up to me after the class, and he says, "Wow, that's a great technique. I never saw that before." He had just happened to miss the classes where the technique was being taught.
All the way through Brown.
All the way through Brown.
Wow.
He had never seen, and I was like blown away. I said, how could you possibly? I said, that's everybody's favorite technique. I said, even though it's not mine, but I said, my God, how could that have happened? Well, with the video, it's right there. You can't miss anything. You cannot miss it because you can't progress to the next technique until you got it. Mm-hmm. You might not care for it that much. You might go over it lightly and say, it's okay. But you can't miss it. It's all there. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the beauties of the system as it's laid out. And it took us 2 years of that board up there and figuring what we had to do and analyzing everything that we had in 55 years mm-hmm. of learning. And at this time, Vic was teaching full time at the West LA school. I mean, he was up on everything. Mm-hmm. I had already cut so much stuff out that there was stuff I didn't remember anymore. But what I remembered was the really solid, the stuff you want, mm-hmm. and that's how that went. But no, with video, when we finally got it defined after 2 full years of working on it, and we finally laid it out and did it, boy, it became so solid. And I think that's what, and all right, not once again, it's actually the first time I said it today. Ed Parker's quote, "I would rather have 10 techniques I can fight with than 100 techniques that fight me." Mm-hmm. And I've seen other fighters. All right, well, talk about Joe Louis. Joe had a very limited arsenal of weapons in his early days. He got a whole lot better later on, but he didn't need to get a whole lot better, really.
Yeah, he won so many with just those 3 moves.
That's right. He had a blasted back fist. He had a fantastic side thrust kick, and he had a reverse punch. And but you couldn't get him. I mean, he was in and out so fast, or he's out. I mean, you'd go for him, he wasn't there. But yet you'd stand there, and all of a sudden he's on you and beating the crap out of you. So I mean, the guy, he didn't have much, but he didn't need any more. He was winning international championships with 3 lousy moves.
Except his 3 lousy moves were better than most people's real good moves.
That's right. His 3 lousy moves were better than most people's entire arsenal. Oh, they got 16 things they can do. What is it with sumo wrestling? I think they've got how many moves? They 100 and something.
It's not that many, yeah.
But the ones they use is like 3 or 4.
Yeah, but they just perfect them and get really, really good at them. They can apply them in different places.
Right.
Same
right.
concept.
Right. But they got, I mean, what they actually practice in their dojos are like hundreds, or not hundreds, but at least dozens.
Yeah.
Dozens and up and over 100. And how many did they need? Those 3.
Just a few really good ones.
That's right. No, I'd rather have the 10 techniques I can fight with than 100 that fight me. I don't ever want to get on the street and have to wonder about what I'm going to be doing or thinking about it.
No, you just want to be able to move.
That's right. No, just move. Steve Muhammad. Hey, I got it right, Steve. He told me about an incident one time where he went to buy some sodas for his kids, and he was on his way there, and some kids on his way, they kind of stopped him, and they were, he felt they're pretty intimidating, and the one, he started asking about karate. Yeah, he takes karate, and Steve said, yeah, a little bit, which is the understatement of the century.
Yeah.
and coming back, the same kid is like, now he's in his face, and he said, I want to know how karate work against a gun. And Steve said, when he hears gun, his blood runs cold, because Steve was in Vietnam. He knows the effect of guns, having suffered them. And he said the guy started to reach behind him like he was carrying something in the small of his back. And Steve says, I remember he was so close I could feel his breath on my face. And so he couldn't cock. So basically he had to use like sort of like reverse. Anyhow, he was so close that he had to actually move away from it as he was striking.
Oh, okay.
I use it all the time. I think. Anyway, he found out later on, and then some other guy touched him and he kicked him, and then some other guy had hit him, and he said one guy. I remember he said, I threw a bottle of pop at him. And he says, I remember leaving, and these guys are basically on the ground in various stages of trying to recover. And then he found out later on from some guy, he said, he said that kid was kind of a goofball. He said he didn't have a gun. And Steve said, well, that's his first mistake.
Yeah.
And no, his first mistake was saying he did. And the guys, no, they were just messing with you, and which is such a bad idea. And Steve found out that when they went to the emergency, the doctor that was treating him said, you were hit with he knocked out the guy's 2 front teeth and broke off another one with the straight shot to a side fist to the face. And he split him from his nose to his chin and did all that damage with one shot. And then another guy, his ribs caved in, and somebody else had this and that. And the doctor was, well, what happened to you? What happened to you? And he said, well, who did this? It was the same guy. Well, who did that? Same guy. Who did that? Same guy. He said, what? His one guy did all this damage to you guys? Yeah, the doctor was blown away. He couldn't believe it while he's sewing him up. So he didn't have time to think. He said, all I saw was targets.
Yep.
That's all I saw. And some of these guys trying to stop him. Hey, Steve, it's okay. But by that time, it was too late.
No, you already flipped the switch.
Yep, he was already in go mode. So, yes.
So 600 black belts later, we've developed the 600 black belts later, you developed the system, so there's enough material to make you have every principle and concept you're going to need, but the focus is still on spontaneity.
Absolutely. Yep. If you're not spontaneous, it's like with shoes. We train with shoes, and we've done that since I actually had shoes introduced into the second international championships. Yeah.
Okay.
That was real early, and that was a funny one because when we announced that yes, shoes would be acceptable if they're soft soled, and not leather, and oh God, there was guys that, you can't do that, no, that's totally out of the ball game, and I remember there was this is one contingent of guys. And they were totally against shoes, and they said, "Well, let's ask Mr." And they had two Japanese gentlemen in snow white geese. Well, we were all in white geese at that time, but I mean, these guys were so traditional. I mean, you could smell it on them, and I thought, well, I just lost that argument. If they're going to leave it up to these guys, I mean, for God's sake, who less would I want? To do that, and they could barely speak English, but they got them over there, and they explained to them about the shoes and everything, talked back and forth, and they said, good idea.
Nice. There's a surprise.
Yeah, so we had traction, we had a surprise, my God, I couldn't believe it, and it was great. And by the next year, that was the year I was the tournament director. So I had just a little bit of juice, and I actually had them introduced. And the next year, and I think for about the next 10, no shoes. And of course, there are still people working out in their bare feet, which makes no sense to me at all. Because first of all, look what you got on your feet right now. And if you have to move, and you're not used to moving with what you got on your feet right now,
that whole ball game can change real quick.
It can change, and even if it doesn't change, it can. It can, but if you're wearing your shoes, you always got shoes on. I work on in my boots.
Just so you make sure you're familiar with them, so
Yep.
you're going to wear them.
Yep, and I slide around more. But if I'm out with them on, what am I going to do?
You're
kick them
familiar
off?
enough to know what it means.
And the last thing I want to do is kick them off because they're great weapons.
Yeah.
So it makes sense on so many levels, like with training in other environments. I loved I read one time about people that would actually go out and try to attack people from the school and set up scenarios, but they didn't know about it. And they said, but it just got too dangerous.
Yeah.
That
can get misinterpreted if somebody doesn't.
Well, the thing is, if you, I mean, they try to make it for real, so you're going to accept that, and then people start getting hurt.
Yep.
I mean, they couldn't do it. They said, no.
Pretty soon you run out of training partners.
Yeah, yeah, like in a hurry. Yeah.
You've been in it this is 58 years, if my math is right.
Yeah, 58 years next month.
And you're still
February.
at it.
Sorry, it's not January yet.
Yeah,
still at it.
Still at it. Still teaching every week. Still developing. You donate your time every time somebody asks for help. Bob White's benefit was a great example. You went down and helped facilitate for Albert Cornejo when he got his 10th.
Right.
Everybody who asks, you always help.
I try. Yeah, if I can. Sure, if I'm in town. Lately, it's been we've been out of town more. We've been in town, so. Which is great because that was the idea. That was the plan years ago to be able to do that. So like I said early on, it's great physical benefits. I feel that I'm in the shape that I'm in today because of what I've done. I've tried to keep my weight down. At one point, I got up to like 180 pounds, and I can't carry 180 pounds. And I'm in the low 160s now, and I'd like to be in the mid 150s. Because that was about my best fighting weight. I don't want to do any fighting anymore, but you still do what you have to, and I still enjoy thumping. So it's not as easy as it used to be, and the reflexes aren't quite there, but I still enjoy it. And so the physical benefits are there. We know that, and don't beat yourself up too much. Don't try to work your knuckles and things of that sort. Because the chances of you having to use them in a street confrontation are so slim. Of all the guys that I've known that are in the art, so few have actually had to. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have the opportunity to. I've had people draw back on me already, and I just look them in the eye and say, don't do that. And for some reason, they've kind of got the message, and they just done something else instead. Call me a name. I can live with that. But I think it was Tom Bleecker that said, if I learned this art just to really be able to defend myself, I've wasted a lot of time and money because I've never had the need. In all these years, I've never had the need, and neither have I. Another thing about the art is it gives you an awareness that I think a lot of people don't get because of what you do and because of what you know the possibilities are. And you can kind of smell things. I know when we were recently on a trip, and there was probably no danger at all, but I didn't like where we were at in Tahiti. I didn't like it. We're on a cruise, and the gentleman who was showing us around the island had to drop us off at a distance because he just couldn't drive into that area. And we had to cross that area, and it was dark, and it was desolate. There was nobody around. And I thought, there could be somebody around, and they could be with ill intent. But nothing happened, and there wasn't. But I just didn't like the feeling. And I was alert through the entire walk. I mean, I was watching where we were going, what we were doing. And I usually have something with me that is a little bit more than my appendages. Just, for things of this sort, like my slinger, my key slinger. I mean, that's that's one of my main things to have. And so if you're doing it for physical conditioning, and as I said earlier, for that insurance policy that you hope you're never going to have to use, but you might, that too. Things have changed since I got in the art, because Kenpo alone isn't enough anymore. It really, if you don't get some ground experience, you're lacking. It wasn't like that for the longest time. Stand-up was all you needed. Now there are people intent upon taking you to the ground. And if you don't know what you're doing on the ground, you're going to be in Hurt City. So you got to know what you're doing on the ground as well. It wasn't like that when I started, and for the longest time. However, I'll say this about that. Get your stand-up first, because I can't remember ever seeing two people crawl across the floor and start wrestling to start a fight. All fights start standing up. Mm-hmm. Now, the ground guys say, 95% of fights wind up on the ground. I would say 95% of their fights wind up on the ground. 95% of our fights stay standing up, because that's where it starts, that's where we finish it. Now, if you don't know what you're doing and you get taken down, like I say, you could be in trouble. So you're going to have to get some. Which would you start with? I would start with a stand-up system. I would get that first, and I wouldn't waste my time by splitting it and trying to get the ground and the stand-up at the same time. I think that's too difficult. So I'd get my stand-up, I'd be ready to go with that, and then I get some ground. And you better do it while you're young, because the ground is unforgiving. And if you started, like I tried to do it in my 60s, that was hard. That was very, very hard. And I finally got a knee popped out, and I was on crutches for a while, and it never happened to me with Kenpo. Mm-hmm. The worst I ever had with Kenpo was 3 stitches on my eye. 3 stitches. And I tried to get away with none, but Doc Schultz, one of our brown belts at the time, said, no, we'll just go to the office, I'll stitch it up, and it'll be nothing. And I said, Doc, put a butterfly thing on it, it'll be nothing now. He said, you'll have a scar. I said, ask me if I care. Yeah. I don't care, so I'll have a scar. He says, you're afraid of the needle, aren't you? I said, you're damn right I am. I said, I don't want you poking me with a needle. He said, well, I'll give you a beer. I said, oh, okay. So I drank a beer, he stitched me up, and that's all there was to it. I took the stitches out myself later on. When I get loose, it's easy. So now get your stand up, learn how to fight on your feet, and hopefully you won't go down, but if you do, you got to have some of the ground stuff too. That's about the best advice I could give. Okay.
And then for people who want to contact you, how would you like people to get a hold of you?
The IKCA has a website, and there's contact information on our website.
It's www.karateconnection.com.
www.karateconnection.com. That's it.
Well, Chuck, thank you so much for allowing me to come down here and interview you here on location in beautiful Paso Robles, California.
Steve, this has been a pleasure beyond what I could tell you.
I'm really looking forward to this because I have a feeling this is going to be yet another podcast where I have to have somebody come back for part 2.
Part 2. Well, there's probably a part 2 here somewhere.
I'm sure there is. We only covered up through Crenshaw, so we got to still talk about Hawthorne and
that's right.
into the IKCA days. So, again, thank you so much. I hope the rest of your trip and your New Year's party goes off without a hitch and everybody has fun.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, Steve.
Alrighty. Signing off. Chuck Sullivan has done so much for so many people. I really had fun talking with the man and getting to hear about so many stories from the early days of Kenpo in Southern California. I'm looking forward to doing part 2, or 3, or 4 with Chuck here in the future. He's had a long career, so who knows how many episodes it's going to take to cover it all. We did 90 plus minutes and we barely got through the mid-60s. I'm grateful Chuck let me come spend a couple of hours with him on his vacation, and thank you again to his family for letting me steal him to record this one. I really did have a blast. Looking forward to episode number 12. Episode number 12 is Joe Rebello Redux. Why Redux? Because we had audio issues with the first one. We were supposed to get this one published back in December, but I was really new to the podcast gig, so I messed up the audio somehow, and we really didn't have a podcast. So luckily, Joe is a super cool dude, and we got back on and re-recorded. He's got a 162 IQ, photoeidetic memory, and his life is the martial arts. He's got a huge patch collection, a gigantic video library, and has a lot of really cool stories from the road and from his experiences in the martial arts. Tune in to hear all about it in episode number 12. If you like what you're hearing so far with these episodes, share the positivity. Ripples in a pond, people. Tell someone you think might enjoy it. Share those links around. Together we can help people just by letting them share in the great messages our guests bring to every episode. Find us at artistemotion.com, artistemotion.com/iTunes, artistemotion.com/Google Play. On our Facebook page, Artists of Motion, you can email pod@artistemotion.com. That's it for this episode. I'm Steve Zalazowski. Catch you next time on the Artists of Motion podcast.